This is a video discussing calculating transportation costs for the Scituate High School athletic program. It's presented by Amy McDonald for EDU 528 Financing and Athletic or Activities Program at William Woods University. The guidelines for transportation in the town of Scituate is that they own their own buses. However, they do lease newer buses. So because the town owns their buses, the trips are provided by those said buses. The trips are contracted out only on particularly busy days. Therefore, the athletic administrator secretary would contact a neighboring town or another bus company in order to contract out their services. However, this does not happen very frequently as coaches try to schedule games on opposite days, or if there is a girls and boys program, one team typically plays at home while the other team plays away. The costs for the buses are calculated as the drivers are paid $50 an hour for the trips. They are paid an additional $25 for trips into Boston or through the city, trips over 50 miles, or weekend trips. The drivers then calculate the duration of the trip and they put in those hours as overtime on their pay stub and submit to the town of Scituate for payment. The cost of the trip is how much they are paid. So, for example, if there is a 4-hour trip at $50 an hour, the cost of the trip would be $200, which is how much the driver would get paid for that particular trip, but is also how much the athletic department would have to pay for that particular trip. And that amount is billed to the Scituate High School athletic department for them to then pay that amount to the town. So in this particular video, we looked at girls volleyball and boys soccer, a girls and boys program that are currently taking place in the fall at the high school. These are both programs where all levels travel together, and these transportation costs do not include postseason game for the varsity program, which were unavailable at the time of calculating costs because it is not postseason play yet. First, we will look at girls volleyball. So when looking at the spreadsheet I created, I took the schedule from the girls volleyball and looked at the date, where they were traveling to, the departure time that was requested by the coach, and estimated return time, the total hours, and then the total cost per trip, which is at $50 an hour, including that $25 additional fee if it was through Boston or a weekend trip, which in this case there was no games where that pertained to this particular program. There was no trips over 50 miles, so all of these games were rated at $50 per hour. So as you can see, there were 11 games where the girls volleyball requested transportation. They were all traveling to locations on the South Shore or pretty centrally located to Scituate High School, which did not require additional fees. All the departure times were pretty much after school, and the return times all ranged from 7 o'clock to the latest was an estimated time of around 8:15, as those were towns that were farther away and therefore took longer to get back for. So the total hours ranged from 3 hours and 45 minutes to 5 hours and 45 minutes, depending on departure and return time. The total cost per trip was then calculated based on that $50 an hour rate. And in this program, there were 50.25 total hours, and the total cost of all of the games amounted to $2,513. When we look further at the numbers to break down the spreadsheet, we see that there are 11 games requiring transportation. And when we look at those total hours, there were 50 hours and 15 minutes, or 50.25 hours. So the average trip length was about 4.57 hours. That is based on the departure time from the high school to the school, the time of the events, and then back to the Scituate High School, where they are then on their own for transportation. The total cost for this program was $2,513, which amounts to, at 11 games, amounts to about $228.45 a trip. Then we look at boys soccer. So boys soccer, this is for all levels, all had games on the same day, all traveling to the same location on one bus. There again were 11 games that requested transportation, and again, all locations that were pretty centrally located to Scituate High School. All of these games, except for this one right here, were after school, ranging from a 4-hour trip to anywhere to 5.5-hour trip, as boys soccer plays their games at the same time, so is not an extensive stay at one particular location. With the exception of this September 8th game, all trips were based on the $50 per hour scale, and then this one, because it was a weekend trip, there was an additional $25 fee for the driver tacked on to this amount. So a trip that normally would have been $225 ended up being $250 based on the weekend trip. So after these were all calculated, the total was actually $2,562, as this total right here is all of the games without this $250, which was added on separately to get this total right here. When we look at these numbers for boys soccer, again, somehow both of the programs only had 11 games requiring transportation. Total hours were 50.75 hours, which for 11 games breaks down to about 4.61 hours. The total cost for all 11 trips was $2,562.50, which comes out to about $232.95 per trip for 11 trips. After looking at both of these and crunching the numbers, I thought it would be important to ask the questioner, are these typical numbers? So both of these programs do not have large teams. Both the girls volleyball and the boys soccer team travel all together. So the girls volleyball, all levels of the program travel together, and the boys soccer program, all levels of the program travel together based on the schedule that was posted on the website. Both of these programs do not have a lot of equipment required, so that doesn't take up space, which doesn't require more than one bus for that program. Both programs only had 11 away games, which I would say is pretty typical. If you take about 20 games per season, divide that in half, is around 10. So 11 games is pretty normal, but these games for both separate programs are played at the same time and on the same day based on the schedule, so that reduces the time at events. So based on all this given information, these are not typical numbers. So we're going to take a look at a different example. So if we look at an example of basketball at the time of this video, there was not a schedule up yet for basketball and time requests had not been put in, but if we were to look at a sport such as basketball, whether it was girls or boys, there are 3 levels. There are a freshman, a JV, and a varsity team where they take 2 buses to away games. So the freshmen take 1 bus normally for an earlier start, and then JV and varsity travel together to the later game, okay? So the time travel and at the events is much longer because the games are staggered. So typically the freshmen play at 3:30, the JV play at 5, and varsity plays at 6:30. So one bus would typically be traveling from about 2:30 to 5:30, 6 o'clock, and then the other second bus would also be traveling at a different time from, I would say, about 4 o'clock, and then wouldn't get home until after the varsity game until after that got over, typically around 8:30, 9 o'clock. So therefore these costs would be much higher just for this one particular program. But looking at the numbers that we were